All right, what's going on, guys? Today, we're going to be diving into the secrets to unlocking calf gains. Now, I get asked about my calves by far more than any other body part. I don't think I have any weak body parts at all, but my calves are my standout. I get asked about them at least once or twice a month. And a lot of bodybuilders, especially like big, heavy guys like pros, they tend to lose their calves as they get further into their career, into their bodybuilding lifting journey. And there's like a lot of speculation. People are saying like, oh, is it nerves? Is it issues like that? What's happening is as you get bigger and more compressed, you no longer have relative motion anywhere, including your foot. And so if we look at our foot, there's tons of little bones in here. We need relative motion in there. And when we lose that, when we lose our ability to pronate through relative motion, we lose our ability to dorsiflex, right? And everybody knows that if you want to build muscle, you need to be able to load the length and range. And if you can't really dorsiflex, you're not going to be able to load the length and tissues. And if you can't really pronate, you're not going to really be able to dorsiflex. So before we dive real deep into everything, let's go over some of the mechanics of pronation if you're not aware. So I'm going to kind of keep it simple. I'm not going to dive super crazy into every little part of it. But the things that we need to understand is we have a rear foot, our calcaneus, and we have our forefoot, and then we have our talus bone, okay? So if we look at our foot, okay, we need those three parts to move kind of in relation to each other. Pronation isn't just falling in and collapsing on the inner part of the foot. It's a spiral that's occurring. The rear foot everts while the front foot inverts. Okay, so the heel moves laterally and the forefoot moves medially in abducts and the toes spread out, and that's how we flatten. Now, if you get that action to occur, the lateral movement of the calcaneus, the eversion, and the inversion of the forefoot, the talus is going to kind of drop down and in. It's going to go back and in a little bit, and that's going to give the tibia a surface it can actually glide on into dorsiflexion. If you don't get the relative motion occurring at the foot for pronation, the talus does not drop down and you no longer have a surface for the tibia to move over and you get locked up. So we need this all to happen in sequence for the tibia to be able to translate forward over that talus. So you could be doing all of the dorsiflexion drills in the world, but if you don't have pronation, then you're kind of wasting your time and not really going to be getting anywhere. And so what happens is bodybuilders just lose their access to the propulsive cycle. They get stuck in like a fake late propulsive representation, and that means they're not able to really eccentrically yield and put the solus or the gastroc under true lengthened tension. So in this video, I'm going to show you some drills to improve your pronation, which will lead to better dorsiflexion, some ways to incorporate that all together. My favorite calf building move, and I'm also going to kind of break down a case study of Iain Valliere and Antoine Valliant and show you how their ability to have true pronation has impacted the ability to build their calves. Let's go ahead and look at some of the examples I have of Iain and Antoine and also Bumstead to kind of show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so when we look at this picture, it's pretty clear that Antoine has calves that are just blowing Iain's away. And Iain won the show. He beat Antoine. Doesn't mean Antoine's a better bodybuilder at all. But we're going to come back in a little bit, and we're going to look at this picture through a little different lens. I'm going to point out some things to you and see if you know what I'm talking about. But right now, just look at their calves. Just look at the difference in the development there. Now, one thing about Antoine, if you've followed him at all, is he's really athletic. I remember when Antoine was younger. I mean, this is like 15 years ago now. Him doing like backflips and shit, and he's always hanging out with Juju. Like they got good mobility. So he's got really good mobility, especially in his legs. And it's no surprise to me that his legs are some of the best in the IFBB. They're by far his best body part. Great size and great detail. And it tends to always be that way. The guys who got the craziest looking legs, like as far as detail and size, look at Tom Platz, look at a lot of the other old school guys that had great legs. They had crazy good mobility as well. And I think Antoine's got great mobility for as huge as he is. I mean, he walks around like 310 easily. So what I'm going to do is just show you a little bit of differences in the way that he moves versus the way that Iain moves. So when we're watching him do these walking lunges, look at this. So if we look at this left foot, I see really good pronation, really good dorsiflexion, really good internal rotation getting driven up the whole system. That's a really positive shin angle. The heel isn't in the air. That's really good foot mechanics and ankle mechanics. When we watch them on the leg press, we'll see pretty decent dorsiflexion and pronation for what it is. A leg press is not really that late in the mid-propulsive cycle. It's kind of early in it, so you don't get as much forward knee travel, as much pronation, but you get some, and you can see that he does. And let's listen to what he has to say about training without shoes.
So I like to do deadlift, barefoot, all the pressing stuff for legs, barefoot. I would really do lunges for doing lunges, barefoot. I just like to be grounded, able to move the toes, feel the whole ground, you know.
So to me, that says a lot. I like to be grounded and to feel the toes, feel the whole ground. So for me, whenever I hear that, to me that means that he likes to feel pronation occur. He likes to feel the forefoot spread out. He likes to actually connect to the ground from his feet. And a lot of bodybuilders don't do that. Even if you have no shoes on, that doesn't mean you're connecting to what's going on with the feet. So he just seems to intuitively understand that.
I feel like I have more power like that, and I have more control over what I'm doing.
So he's got his feet out pretty wide on this leg press, but that's kind of what he has to do to be able to drive pronation with this setup. So that's not necessarily a bad thing. You got to go where your hips go. Now, when we watch his squats, look at this. This is a very kind of IR representation. We don't see a butt wink. We see forward knee drive. We see the feet flattening out. You know, again, he's kind of wider on this, but he's producing IR through there. He's not trying to turn this into an externally rotated move. You can see very little bit of a butt wink. So this is a lot of pronation and dorsiflexion happening in that kind of a squat. Now we're going to look at some of Iain's stuff and compare him to Chris Bumstead. That's like really good. You can tell that the talus has dropped down and in. The tibia has been able to move forward. Heel's totally flat. That's a lot of pronation and dorsiflexion there. And just look at the hip angle. That is pretty good. Chris is athletic. One thing you'll notice if you do what I do long enough is athletes are really good at pronation, or at least like faking pronation in a way that helps them with their sport. And so we're going to just watch Chris go, and then we're going to compare kind of what his form looks like to Iain's. So just look at that shin angle. Look at right here how this is a really sharp angle. That's a real good cue of like what's going on with the talus. Is our calcaneus everting or not? Because if it doesn't, then you're going to have a little bit of a like rigidity there that you don't see on Chris. So we can already see Iain looks a little bit more uncomfortable, right? He's fucking huge. Like to be expected. Now when we watch him actually doing his reps, let's look at where he finishes. So I'll give him a little deeper than that. About right there. So I'll give you a comparison in a second, but this is a lot different looking. You don't see as much forward shin angle. I don't see the same angle at the ankle as far as dorsiflexion. So a lot more locked up as he's pressing. So let's look at the comparison of where they're at. So as you can see, just a lot more true IR, a lot more angle of dorsiflexion at the ankle. The foot is actually truly flatter because he's pronating. I feel like Iain's got a flat foot, but he doesn't hit true pronation, so it's not actually as flat as Bumstead. He's not able to actually get it to go all the way down because he can't facilitate that heel to evert. And even if you look at like the pelvis, even like Iain's pelvis is starting to come under him a little bit. It's rolling under, whereas Chris doesn't really have that issue. So obviously, like I said, Iain's a lot bigger, so he's going to look a little different, but this isn't just about like having muscle mass that's making you run out of room. This is about missing space in the joints and relative motion of the feet. Now, one more time, when we watch Chris go, look at his heel. I think you can see it from here. Like, it is glued down to that platform, and he's got his feet lower than Iain. Totally glued. When we watch Iain go, you can see that he has a little bit more trouble keeping that completely stuck to the plate. So watch his heel as he starts to go. Already right there, lift a little bit. You can look at the gray. See that little lift? See that little lift? Super subtle, but that's because the calcaneus isn't everting. It's going kind of just forward in space slightly. And Iain knows he's got a little bit of limitations.
For anyone wondering why I've been doing this one too, I find this one just the easiest for me to get the most amount of deflection with the least amount of strain to my back and to my ankles. Like you don't need quite as much ankle flexion, so I find you get the deepest, like you saw Chris there, good depth and a lot of deflection, but it's not quite as hard.
So that is something that is true. If you don't have really good pronation, a lot of times your back takes a little bit of stress as well. So Iain feels it in his back and his ankles. So he uses this machine that gives you a little bit of a favorable angle on the platform so he can kind of just push hard without having to worry about his limitations. Now let's look at Iain do some free weight squats compared to Antoine. Right off the bat, you can see that he's using wedges, which I would probably do if I was Iain because that's going to take away the need to have such good pronation. And actually, what he's doing is he's not all the way on the wedges. When you come a little bit off, sometimes that can encourage a little bit more pronation. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. It just depends on if you want your center of mass going forward a little extra or not. But when we watch him go down, we see a really big butt wink. We see like really not an internally rotated representation, which, you know, for a squat, typically if you're putting like yourself under load, you're moving weight, trying to get your quads, you want a little more IR bias in there. You can see a big butt wing going on, which, you know, is fine for him. He's able to do it without any issues, but he's kind of just working around his limitations. So when we compare his squat setup to Antoine's, look at the difference. A lot less of a butt wink, a lot more of a true pronation and forward angle of the shins. This is a forward angle of the shins, but it's just because of the steps that he's using. And so at this point, Iain is more in a later propulsive phase of the squat. He's kind of pulled under into ER, where Antoine's really staying more in an IR bias. So again, this isn't to say that one is, you know, superior to the other. I mean, personally, I prefer to squat the way Antoine does, but you could squat like Iain and potentially have no issues from squatting and build a crazy physique just like he did. It's just using a little bit less relative motion and a lot more from your low back and your butt. And here we've got some more leg presses, and you can just see like how athletic Chris is with the way he's able to like do his crazy jumps. You guys see that video where he was doing that after he retired? So I mean, Chris is athletic as fuck. You can see it in the way he moves. Iain, I know he wants to think he's super athletic. You know, he loves to race, but I think Paul has a shot against you, big guy. You know, I'm sure you were super athletic once, but you've trained that out of your body. And so when we look at this setup again, you can just see the same thing. Tight IR, tight dorsiflexion and pronation. Iain, the bottom of his position just looks super uncomfortable. You can see, I mean, what I'm looking at is he's able to produce some IR through the right leg, right foot, not so much the left. That's why he's got to splay out so far for it. So Chris is really showing us how he's got much better like lower body mechanics than Iain as far as range of motion and internal rotation capacity, which is going to happen to some extent. Like I said, you're just not going to be as huge as Iain and be as mobile as a classic physique guy. But even on this move, which is something that's a little more for like probably not so focused on IR and getting the knee real far forward, it's a little bit of posterior chain as well. Even on that, you can see Iain has a lot less going through the actual foot. Looks like he's real heavy on that heel. Let's look at Bumstead again. Now look at Bumstead. Just look at how fluid that travels forward. And you can see like he's putting weight through the middle of his foot. Just if you kind of watch the fluidity of that, you can imagine the foot changing shapes. Whereas this, just with this, I can just tell he's just driving all through that heel. So not a lot going on as far as like pronation for Iain on this. And now when we come back to this picture and I'm looking at this, I want to tell you guys what I see, because I've got a weird eye and this is all I do. And I'm really like over analytical. So when I'm looking at this, obviously we see a big difference in the calves. You know, Iain's got much smaller calves than Antoine. The next biggest difference as far as physique and the lower body goes is probably Iain's ass, right? Iain has got a fat ass, bro. Where Antoine, you know, not so glute dominant. Crazy good separated hamstrings. I would say his hamstrings are better than Iain's, but Iain's ass is definitely denser than Antoine's. And if we think about their squat patterns and the way they move, that makes sense because Iain doesn't really create shape changes of the pelvis, IR, ER. He kind of just runs through space and gets a little bit of anterior and posterior tipping. There's not a lot of pelvic shape changes occurring. When I watch Antoine, I can see he's acquiring different shapes of the pelvis. So that's just not going to put as much through your back and as much through your butt. So I'm not surprised that Iain has a much fatter ass than Antoine, and I'm not surprised that Antoine's got much better details and roundness to his legs. Now, if we just look at how they're standing, let's just look at how they're standing for a second. Look at Antoine's right foot and look at Iain's right foot. We can see a lot more stretching going on, a lot more forefoot spreading. I guarantee you the arch is flattening out here. Iain just kind of looks like he has a flat foot and he just picked it up a little bit without any shape change at all happening to the foot. And that's because he doesn't have that ability naturally, not as easily. When we look at the left leg, notice how Iain's left leg is way more turned out, his toes way more turned out than Antoine. And that's because he's got less internal rotation. You're going to go to where there's space. People will be like, oh, that's just random. That's just the way they're standing for that pose. No, you go to where you have space to produce internal rotation into the ground to counter gravity so you don't fall over. So Antoine's internal rotation space is less outside than Iain's because he doesn't have very much, which you can tell through his squat mechanics and also his foot mechanics. So again, Iain won the show. Iain's the better bodybuilder. But I think if he would have been aware of some of the stuff I'm talking about, he probably could have had a little better legs and definitely better calves. When we look at him from the front, it's like, again, Ian's got good legs. I mean, Iain doesn't have bad legs at all, but he's got a different look to his legs, right, than someone like Antoine. Someone like Antoine who's got mobility, they just tend to have more detailed separation, a little more like roundness to the sweeps. Iain just looks fucking gnarly. He just looks like a stiff fucking dude who moves a fuck ton of weight. So again, not bad, just a different look, and one of them is going to be a little bit more functional than the other. And so really, the thing is, you can have a workaround for having shitty dorsiflexion and pronation of your foot if you're trying to build good legs. You can use the wedges like Iain does. There's a lot of machines that can put you in positions that make up for you lacking, as you saw with some of the exercise selection that Iain liked to do. So it's not the end of the world for quad development. I do think it takes away from some of the details and some of the cleanness of the lines and the sweep. But when it comes to building calves, if you're missing pronation of your foot, there's not really a workaround for that. If you don't have that ability to pronate, there's nothing you can really do. There's no like specific machine setup. You can't use like normal wedges to try to make up for that. If you can't pronate, you're not going to get true dorsiflexion. You're not going to be able to build your calves. You can have like not true dorsiflexion build legs, but not nice detailed big calves. All right, so the first move we're going to do to help create some pronation of our foot so we can get better dorsiflexion is this kneeling, just knee over toe move that you may see a lot of people just kind of try to get ankle mobility by driving that knee forward over the toe without really paying attention to what's going on at the foot, and that can jam up things even worse if you're tight there. So what we want to do is first just make sure your hip is in a good spot too. A lot of times people are real hiked up on the side that's up. That's not going to facilitate interrotation through the system. We need that to drop down to actually get the foot to pronate a little bit better. And so what you want to do is you want to just real subtly drive the knee forward. Make sure your foot is very slightly pigeoned. Okay, with a lot of these drills, it'll be very slightly pigeoned. We're going to just drive forward, not losing the heel, and keep as much weight on the inner part of the foot as you can without losing the pinky toe or the heel at all. The knee will go in. Think about it going in to the big toe or even a little bit past that. And then we're just going to rock back. So what you want to really connect with on this is the feeling of your foot kind of flattening out, that arch dropping down to the ground. And so you're just going to do a couple little reps like that. It doesn't take a ton. I usually say about like 8 to 10. And you can kind of hold, and it's always good to breathe in these positions. And so we're a little bit pigeoned, so we get the tibia to go into IR as you're moving forward, which will give you more dorsiflexion. As you shift back, the weight can go a little bit more to the outer heel. As you shift forward, it's going to be the inner heel, and you'll feel that foot flatten out. Don't go to where the heel comes off. So super simple, and people do this drill all the time, but they're not really mindful of what's going on at the foot. That's what this is about. All right, so the second drill we're going to do is this heel drop. And you can start with this if you're not super locked up. You don't necessarily have to go to the kneeling one first. That's for people that have like no pronation at all. So on this, what we're going to do is you're going to be pigeon-toed, heavy through that first med head. And real simple, all we want to do is drop your foot, keeping pressure through that inner part the whole time. And again, connecting to the feeling of those toes kind of splaying out as you're going down. So I'm not losing under the big toe, and I'm feeling my whole heel. And the pigeoned toe position, again, is really helpful because it makes sure that you drive tibia IR, which will end up giving you more dorsiflexion. So real simple. I'm at the top. Almost all the weight is in that first med head under that big toe. I'm staying on the inside edge of my heel as I drop. You might notice you've got one foot that connects to this a lot better than the other. For most of you guys, that'll be your left foot. So for me, whenever I go to my right, I automatically want to be heavy on my outer toes. It's hard for me to get heavy on that big toe. Might not be able to go quite as pigeon. I'm heavy on the big toe. And I'm trying to stay down. A lot less natural feeling on the right. I feel like my toes don't want to splay. There we go. And just then I was able to get an actual drop of my arch. And so my talus moved and I could feel my tibia translate forward. So now I'm there. It's just a lot harder to connect to, and I feel more of a stretch in my arch
on the right. Now, I'm not really producing force when I'm picking it up. I'm just kind of picking it up, putting pressure through that big toe at the top.
Okay, so up next, I'm gonna do a easy drill, but like all the other stuff, it really comes down to paying attention to what's going on with the foot to get what we want out of it. So this is kind of an introduction pronation drill, kind of the beginning of like a fencer squat, which is a move that I do a lot. So you want to use a little support. I know it seems like you might not need it, but I always use it when I'm doing this. It's just very helpful when all we're trying to do is drive intent, not really worried about stabilizing. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna start with this kind of early stance position on the right leg. So far, all the things that we've done have been focusing on mid propulsion because that's where pronation lives. But if you can't have access to early propulsion, you're not going to be able to pronate through mid propulsion. So this is the first move where we're really kind of playing with that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shift this hip back. My front leg is in a negative shin angle. Okay, the weight is mainly on the outer heel. I'm not losing my big toe, but essentially I'm in a more supinated foot position right there. So what I'm gonna do on this is I'm gonna lead real subtly with the knee. Really, really important that we lead with the knee and don't just turn the whole hips. It's super subtle, but that is gonna be relative motion that we can help to use to facilitate pronation downstream. If we orient and just move your pelvis, your knee kind of goes off track, we get like a fake pronation, just almost a collapsing in. We don't want to reinforce that. So I'm going to think about the outer heel here. I'm going to leave the knee. Nothing's even going to move at all, just that knee. As soon as I start that, now I'm kind of off that outer heel. I'm on the middle heel and a little bit heavier on the first med head. So here it's like 90%, 85% outer heel. There, now I'm kind of middle-ish heel, probably 70%, maybe 30% first med head, maybe even a little bit more first med head. As I continue to drive for the knee, now my hips will follow, and now I'm about halfway there. I'm about even 50% inner heel, 50% first med head. As I continue to drive forward, now I'm feeling that arch flatten out. I'm really kind of on the first med head mainly. My heel's not up, but I can feel my toes splayed out and my arch is collapsed. And then I'm going to push back. As I push back, I'll let the hips turn a little bit, get back to that early stance, heavy on the outer heel. So all you got to really think about on this is lead with the knee and then think about the foot contacts as we're progressing through to the point where that arch is collapsed. And what that's representative is kind of the later phase of max propulsion when we're about to go to late P and get off of that leg. So it's the early propulsion all the way through max propulsion cycle. Not really doing late propulsion. Don't really need to necessarily worry about that at all right now. So one more time, outer heel, inner heel, first med head, just moving the knee separate from the hip, making sure they don't go together. As I push forward, I want to make sure also that I'm not like driving really hard off the back left leg. I'm kind of just shifting forward through space. Okay, so just not a push off the left leg, not a side lunge variation. And so as I do this, I get a lot of crackles and pops and things really loosen up. And for some people, just doing this move can really change the shape that your body wants to make from the pelvis to the foot and give you access to IR if you don't have it, because you're producing IR through a very externally rotated position. You're superimposing it. And you just gotta make sure that you don't turn the whole hips as a unit. Lead with the knee, get that relative motion. This will also be really good for hip mobility. All right, so for this next move, we're gonna start integrating some things together now. And this is how we would progress this to just doing like a normal stiff leg deadlift or something with good pronation. So I'm gonna be in the split stance position. I'm gonna reach towards that left foot, and you could use support on this. A lot of times I have somebody use support on their left hand as they reach towards it. It all depends on if you can keep the foot flat or not. So same thing, I'm starting like on the middle heel. I'm not starting on the outer heel because I'm not in an early P position. But as I hinge over, I connect to that big toe, that first med head without losing the heel. And I'm just gonna breathe from there. Make sure that knee translates a little more forward. Now I've got a little more flattening of the arch. Really good. I'm gonna adjust a little bit so I can get a little more over it. And just breathe from there. So I want that forward shin angle, flat foot. Don't lose the heel, but be heavy on that first med head. Really good. Now, something that I might do for my right side to help is potentially elevate it a little bit on the back foot. And I would do this on my right side just because I tend to not have as good of access to the later phases of propulsion, like mid P, like middle P, later middle P. And so this will allow me just to get my center of mass a little bit more forward and to get that forward translation of that tibia a little easier. So I'm still gonna reach down, feel that. You should feel that back pocket open up. This is also a great move for lower posterior expansion. So this will drive IR through the whole system. We're doing it kind of with an intent on getting the foot to pronate, but we'll get better tibia IR, better hip IR. There we go. It's hard on that right side. See how I'm shaking? Oh. So it took me like until that rep there to I actually connected on my right side. I could feel that arch go down. So you have to connect to what's going on. If you're just going through the motions, you're not going to make any real change. Okay, so we did a pronation drill from an ER bias and superimposed IR when we did the fencer pronation drill. This is a progression where it's really kind of IR focused, and this is going to drive way more IR throughout the system. So you want to make sure you have the space available before you do this. That's why this would be later. We're going to use a DC block or something to elevate. You don't have to, but it does help because you start a little bit more ER. It gives you a little more space to produce some IR. And so on this one, I'm going to get my arms going reciprocally too. So same concept. I'm going to be heel here. You could bias it even a little bit more towards like outer heel and early P. I'm going to stay a little bit more over it and not start it with as much of a negative shin angle, but it still is a little bit. So I'm like on the middle heel mainly. So I'm going to start dropping as I'm shifting forward, thinking about those contact points. And I'm going to hold it just for a second. So I'm going to let the pelvis come under me, keep that pressure on the first med head without losing the heel as far forward as you can get. And since I'm trying to drive as much IR as I can, I'm trying to get close to around 90 degrees of hip flexion or so. And after you do a move like this, you'll have big improvements through everything IR, even more through dorsiflexion and hip IR than you would get doing the fencer variation. So this is one of the reasons why I don't think that it's a great idea to just hammer like dorsiflexion or try to like isolate everything, because things work together. We need to create a change downstream. There's probably something we need to change upstream. You can't just hammer dorsiflexion and think that'll get it. And also, I'm not showing it for any of these drills, but Gary Ward has some great foot wedges, and I think they're so helpful. So I didn't want to use them just because most people don't have them. You can use wedges specifically designed to help with your pronation, and they help a lot get the relative motion of your feet. So look into those if you want a little extra help. Now, if you are just having a lot of trouble connecting to anything, you're just feeling your front side of your ankle getting really jammed up when we're trying to do these pronation drills, you can do this little bit of a move using the foam roller to bias your tibia into IR while we kind of shift back and force some pronation and dorsiflexion to happen. So what you want to do is you're going to put the roller like right on this outside part of this bone, like right at the top. But you're going to start a tiny bit lower because we're going to roll, but that's where you kind of want to finish, about right there. And we're going to turn our foot in slightly behind us so that we get a little bit of that IR bias. And I'm just going to rock back. So I'll show you from a couple angles. So real simple. I got that roller right below where I showed you where I want it to end up. And I'm just pushing back on the roller really heavy through the big toe. Okay, so I've got that pressure, keeping that from coming out into ER, staying IR there. And when you get into it good, you'll feel like medial stuff, like the Achilles slightly more to the inside, like a really big stretch along that inside stuff on your calf, like more Achilles, but
kind of the foot too. So it's a real small rock, and then once you're in there, you can kind of just chill. So I'm getting like all kinds of cracks and pops in my ankle now after doing that. So here's the side view. I'm gonna plant that big toe. And on this right side, I gotta make sure I get that inner track of stuff stretched. It's a little harder to connect you on the right side for most people than the left, as I was saying. So I'm pigeon-toed. I'm on that inner part. And I'm just gonna rock back. There it is. There it is. Right in there. This is where you should feel that. And that'll help loosen up your Achilles, and that'll also help you get a little bit better eversion on your calcaneus if you can loosen that up, that area. Do from the left side. And there, I got it on the left side a lot quicker. All right, so for this one, we're starting to train a little more of that later propulsion. So we're in that late mid-P range. And this is just a step down. You guys know I love step downs. If you watch my stuff, they offer a lot of benefits. And one of them is increasing your ability to pronate. So as always, inner stuff is going to be our contact points, especially on this one. Some of the things we reference outer or even more middle heel in the beginning. This one is inside from the beginning because it's all later mid propulsion. So I'm going to try to stay relatively tall on this. It's not the same way you would load it if you were doing your quads. And I'm just gonna let that knee travel forward, heavy on that inner foot, without losing the heel. And you should feel a lot of anterior ankle compression on this. That's not a bad thing, but it's definitely gonna be something that's gonna be really deep, and it should be like a lot. If you're not able to create a lot of compression there, then we're not getting much expansion from your foot in pronation. So again, don't be afraid for the knee to travel in. People kind of freak out if they see the knee going inward. As long as like our pelvis doesn't go with it, it's fine for it to be even inside that big toe on a drill like this. So as I'm getting deeper, I'm thinking about spreading out my foot. Oh, whew, man, I feel super loose from doing all this stuff. Let's compare that just real quick to see if there's a big difference on the right side. So when I do this right side, right now I'm getting more stretch at the back, which actually that's not what I'm trying to get right now. Because if I can get the talus to drop the way it's supposed to, I shouldn't necessarily feel quite as much of an Achilles stretch on this while my foot is flat at least. Okay, let's see if I can get this a little better. I think it'd be easier if I was supporting myself on the right side. There we go. Now I feel an anterior compression. I still feel a tiny bit on the back, but that's good. You should feel like a little bit, but it shouldn't be like a crazy, crazy stretch like I felt at first. Oh, there you go. Oh, now I'm in there. So you have to be aware of what's actually going on, and you can kind of compare back and forth. That can help see what's going on one side versus the other. And sled pushes can actually be really good for increasing your ability to pronate and getting your tibia to IR with dorsiflexion. If you do it with a little bit of a pigeon-toed step, and you really drive pressure through that big toe, and it's more the toe going in, not the whole leg or the whole pelvis, it can be really good. And you should feel that same line of tension, that kind of the medial stuff I was talking about on some of the other things. So you can see my starting position. My foot's a little tiny bit pigeon-toed, but I'm heavy on the big toe. And as I'm walking forward, I'm driving through that position that's keeping my tibia in IR, and I can feel it stretching out that Achilles and that inner area. And so that's just a way to kind of progress some of the stuff that we've been doing, trying to acquire space, and now we're producing force into that space, putting together the tibia IR. And this can also help with potentially some of the stiffness requirements as well in your foot, but it's kind of like we are staying on the edge of like mid propulsion to max propulsion, that the later half of mid propulsion. So this can kind of train you to get that last little bit if you've been having trouble. It's like funny, after doing all these drills, now it's like I've got so much ankle and like foot mobility, I can feel my feet so good.
Now, these are a couple moves that I think would be really great to add in at the end after you've reestablished some sort of pronation ability. And this is from Kyle Dobbs on his Instagram, who's awesome trainer. I had him on the podcast. I really need to redo it. I lost the video and the audio kind of sucked. So super smart guy though. Check this stuff out. And what we have here first is just a plyo on a slanted angle of a hard box. Okay, so we see a lot of like stiffness occurring. If you look at like where we're at in the propulsive cycle, this is a little bit later, mid-max propulsion. Now, whenever we look at this move on the softer surface, we can see it's not as big of a stretch down. There's a lot more forefoot kind of spreading going on. It's not as dynamic, as explosive, as stiff as this. It's more about creating yielding control and having your pronation happen slower, which is important as well. So both of these would be good for everybody. But if you are like a wider ISA who's completely collapsed, then this would be a good move for you. Or if you are a narrow ISA with no yielding IR ability, this would be good. And if you were a more compressed narrow, then I would like the softer surface. And also, if you were a wider ISA who had a little more of like an early foot representation, you weren't super flat, then this could be a better starting point as well.
All right, so I fucked up this next part. I cut off my head and it was all blurry, but luckily I'm in Vegas doing some work with Sergio, so I got my camera guy with me, so this will probably come out even better. But I'm about to show you guys my absolute favorite exercise for calves, and I call it the propulsive calf raise. And I've gone into some like super deep dives into this on my member section. Like I break down all the intricacies of it and how it correlates with the propulsive gaze cycle. So if you want to like nerd out and dive in real deep, you could check that out. But I do think it's beneficial to understand some of the components of the gaze cycle so you can understand how it relates to this calf movement and kind of just all calf exercises pretty much. So what I think you need to understand on this is most calf raises, and especially this one, we're trying to maximize the middle propulsion phase of the propulsive gaze cycle. And so all you really need to know is when we're getting to the middle phase, that's when we've made like full heel contact with the lead leg and we've translated our weight forward. So now we're not so heavy on the heel. We're starting to go through the beginning parts of pronation. The same side abs are going to be on. We're going to be a little bit flexed at the hips and a little bit flexed at the knee. So that's the beginning of middle propulsion. Now, as you move through middle propulsion, we get towards maximum propulsion, which is really what we're trying to magnify the most. That's where we have the heel lift, the moment where their heel lifts. And so what's happening there is we're going through some hip extension, some knee extension. The weight's kind of shifting even more to the inner part of the foot. We're really pushing through that big toe, through that first ray, and the opposite side abs are starting to turn on. So as you start that mid-propulsive phase, you've made heel contact, you've started to translate the tibia forward, your foot is flattening out, you got some knee flexion, you got some hip flexion, you got the same side abs on. As you transition to maximum propulsion, getting through the end of the middle P phase, now we've gone through hip extension, knee extension, our center of mass has moved forward, and we pushed through even more on the inner part, really through the big toe, and the opposite side abs are starting to engage because that's where we would start to turn the other leg into the stance leg and those abs come on there as we rotate the thorax over the other side. Now, if you can sync that all up together in this move, you're going to be able to create like a super focal compressed force on that medial part of your calf, the part that everybody wants to get. Okay, so let me show you what that looks like in practice. Okay, so I don't know if I cut off my head, but that's okay. Just pay attention to my beefy calves. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna shift back. I'm gonna let the hips flex a little bit, knees flex a little bit. I'm gonna be really even across the forefoot. So I have like maybe a slight bit more pressure on the first med head, but I'm pretty heavy on the fifth med head. It's pretty even across. And then as I start to do my rep, I'm gonna start pushing through that first med head immediately. I'm gonna let all that force kind of localize there. And as I do that, I'm gonna go into hip extension, knee extension, translate forward. I'm gonna really push through the inner part of that foot. That might even end up hiking the opposite side hip a little bit. That's okay. And so I kind of turn these abs on at the end. And When you do this correctly, you're going to create such a compression gradient on that medial part of the gastroc. You probably never felt something like that before if you haven't gone through all these steps and you don't have a foot that can actually pronate. So it's not crazy aggressive, and you can play with how much knee flexion and how much hip extension you're getting, and they're all kind of good. But normally I stay about here, and I don't use any weight at all. Because I can really just direct that pressure so easily. So as I'm getting to the top, I'm pushing so hard with my foot, I almost like get this hip to hike a little bit, right? And that kind of pairs up with the right abs. My knee, it can go really far in. It can almost go inside the big toe, and that's almost the start of what like late P is, because your tibia starts to ER, so we can kind of superimpose that on top of here. So right there. You don't have to get the biggest stretch in the world because you're getting a real stretch. Now, this is going to be one of those movements that when you do it on the other side, you're probably going to be feeling a little bit different. I'll give you a little different angle on this right side. And so for me, if I'm not careful, I'm just going to sink into this hip. I'm not really able to get it at all forward, which it needs to be a little bit forward to be like real max propulsion. It can't be stuck back in that early P hip position. So I have to just be aware of that. And on this side, if I really think about the left abs turning on, that helps me get that medial gastroc activation. But really common to be way more connected on one side, typically the left. There we go. There we go. Really through the big toe. A little pigeon position. Whew. All right.
And if you're not able to connect to your right side while you're doing the propulsive calf raise, there's a couple things that could be going on. That's why it's good to understand your body. Like a lot of times this right side is just like posteriorly oriented so much that you're not really in a position to produce the later phases of the propulsive gait cycle. You're just kind of stuck in that early P, early mid P. And in that case, you might need to do something to get this right side ilium to ER a little bit. If you were to do a breathing drill, that could be like the right sideline glute max, or if you want to do an exercise, that could be like the DNS star. But sometimes you have trouble connecting to it, not because it's so pulled back, but you're so tipped forward and you're turned. So then it's a little bit different thing. It wouldn't necessarily be the glute stuff that would help you. You need to reorient the whole pelvis. So you could do something like a sideline cross connect could help, or if you were doing an exercise like a Camporini potentially could help. Even like a crossover sled walk could help reorient that pelvis. Because a lot of times you're not gonna be able to get it just by trying to push a little more forward if this is super compressed posteriorly. So obviously I love the propulsive calf raise, but when it comes to selecting your other calf exercises, I think that a seated calf raise should be included. I think they get a really bad rap. Definitely check out the video that Faz Lifts put out about it. I think he kind of dispels some of the myths around the problems with the seated calf raise. I love it. You don't get a lot of like propulsive mechanics into it. It kind of locks you into like an early mid propulsion. There's no translation forward, but that's fine. Like that's okay. We don't have to make every single exercise like a big part of the propulsive gait cycle. So I pretty much just do the propulsive calf raise and seated calf raises. I will do some donkey calf raises sometimes. I don't really do standing calf raises just because it's so much weight on my shoulders, but those can be fine too. When you do a standing calf raise, just try to give yourself a little bit of forward propulsion as you're coming up. Let your center of mass move forward as you push through the inner toes. That will help you get better activation. So when it comes to like volume and frequency, I mean, I do calves twice a week when I do legs, but you can do them more frequent. Usually, honestly, I just do the propulsive calf raise because I've been working out at home a lot lately. But if I go to the gym, I'll do maybe like 2 sets of the propulsive calf raise and 2 or 3 sets of the seated. But a lot of times I'm just busting like 3 of the propulsive on my own. But if you need better calves, it's not always about just more volume. You can definitely throw more volume in. Your calves tend to handle a little bit better. But I think people like go crazy. They hear about Arnold, how he just started doing calves between every single set and like that unlocked his growth. It's like, if you're connected to your body, which I know Arnold is, like you can feel things happen and you can facilitate that easier. But if you're somebody who you're not that kinesthetically gifted and you're just like hammering more calf raises to try to build your calves and your ankles already jammed, you got no pronation, probably not going to help you just throw in a lot more volume like anything else. Like if you've got sheeting mechanics, doing more sheeting mechanics typically doesn't help the problem. So I do want to show you guys something to keep in mind, and this is me using the donkey calf machine. Is it's so vital where you're driving, the intent and pressure. So when I'm doing this calf raise, right now I'm really heavy on the inner feet. I'm really pushing through that first med head, the big toe. And this is a pretty heavy weight for me to do with this kind of control. And so just look at my feet. You can see how heavy I am on the inside. As I'm coming down, I'm maintaining heavy. And I'm getting close to failure, but now I just switched just a little bit. And look, I can pump that out. Now I'm gonna go back to pressing from the inner, right here. And I got like one more rep in me. But if I switch it back and I just get a little loose, I can crank out some more. One more normal, not even. So I know that's super subtle. I'm going to see if you can see it one more time. So right here, these are all good. I'll show you once I start doing it a little bit off. And when I do switch my mechanics up, it gets like 30% easier. So inner foot pressure. Clean. Big toe, heavy. Burning, really bad. Okay, now I'm just pushing up. I'm not pushing off the inner. I'm just coming up through kind of the middle. It's not even, now I went through the outer. That was a lot easier, but now I'm back on the inner, and it's hard again. I lost some range of motion because it's so hard. But when I go out, I can get up. But when I go back in, total failure. So I know that's super subtle, but that is the only difference is me really focusing on pressure on the inner feet versus just letting it go to the midfoot. That's it. And that was the difference between me hitting failure and me being able to crank out another like 5 reps, but without as good as tension. All right, so I think that is all that I got for you guys. Let's do a quick review. So if you are wanting to improve your calves, you need to make sure that you have dorsiflexion. But in order to have dorsiflexion, we need pronation to occur so the tibia can actually translate forward over that talus bone. We need the forefoot to invert as the rear foot everts. That is the spiral that is going to allow us to get maximum dorsiflexion, maximum stretch tension on our calves. So I'll give you a ton of drills that you can do in a progressive order to try and improve your pronation and thus dorsiflexion. We also saw how having limited pronation can also affect not just your calf training, but also just your leg training in general, although there are some more workarounds for that than there are for lacking pronation affecting your calves. And when it comes to exercise selection and volume, etc., I'm a huge fan of that propulsive calf raise that I showed you guys. I think that is the most bang for your buck out of any move you can do. I like to do seated calf raises a lot as well. And personally, donkey calf raises are a big favorite of mine too, because you can get like a lot of lower posterior expansion while you're doing that. You feel the stretch up high, like your attachments if you do it right. Standing calf raises are great too. Just make sure that whenever the exercise lends itself to it, you add a little bit of forward propulsion, like in a standing calf raise, you could do that. And make sure that we're always pushing heavily through the big toe and coming down on the inside of your foot. When it comes to volume, personally, I treat calves just like any other muscle group. When you do them really like intensely and you get the tension right where you want, you're not really able to crank out just tons and tons of volume. You might be able to do a little bit more because they got a little more slow twitch muscles, but don't go crazy increasing the volume because you think that is what is keeping you from growing your calves. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's not having the intent, but like I said before, if you got horrible mechanics and you're just doing more and more exercises with those horrible mechanics and not really improving anything, in fact, you're probably compounding the issue. So hopefully this helped you guys a little bit. If you have any questions, comments, suggestions, drop them below. Appreciate the support.